Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Harvesting Justice podcast. My name is Melanie Salazar, and I am your executive director of Pro-Life San Francisco. Today, I'm with my co-host, Robert Bird. Welcome on, Robert.
How's it going?
Our executive coordinator at Pro-Life SF. And today, we are chatting with our friend, Tommy Kearns, father of Clementine. Welcome on, Tommy.
I'm really happy to be here.
Woo, hoo, hoo, hoo. Yay. So we're so excited to be chatting with you today about all the recent happenings, progress being made in the fight for Clementine. But before we dive into all that, just give us a little reintroduction of who you are. Who is the man, the myth, the legend, Tommy Kearns?
Absolutely. So to begin, I am a father. Clementine is my daughter, and sadly, Clementine is still missing. That is the reason why we're all here. We all understand what fetal organ harvesting is. We all understand the industry of fetal organ trafficking. And that's exactly what's happening to Clementine. Clementine was taken illegally. Abortion procedure was changed and completely forced without consent or knowledge. We have all of the medical documents. We have all of the evidence. And me and Clementine's mother are together trying to find our daughter's body and stop the experiments that are being done on her. Clementine is traceable, and we have a lot of really great news and great updates, but we still are looking for Clementine.
I think that was a beautiful abridged version of this story. And if you want to hear more in depth on the fight for Clementine, the story in and of itself, please check out episode 3 of the Harvesting Justice podcast. That is when we spoke with Tommy for the first time, really going in depth to this story. But today, we're going to be talking about recent developments and what is on the horizon. So, Tommy, the documentary, let's hear about it.
So, David Daleiden, who we all know, if you don't know of David, you should definitely check out him and his organization, Center for Medical Progress. Without David, I really don't know what our family would have done with trying to move forward to get answers. David had put together a documentary with expert opinions, 2 prior abortionists that actually reviewed the medical documents, and their findings were really sad and just horrific. And it's been a really difficult experience, but David Daleiden's help has really made things just a lot more digestible, I guess. It's been really hard, and it's something that is completely not normal. Like, none of this is normal or okay, and not enough people understand that it's happening every single day in our country and around the world. Fetal organ harvesting is one of the legs of abortion. Fetal organ harvesting and fetal tissue experiments is a direct byproduct of the abortion industry and everything that they do to manipulate and take advantage of people to harvest their children's bodies as if they were products of conception or just mere tissue or genetic material. And it's something that should be talked about a lot more.
I remember when I first learned about the tragedy of this nationwide abortion-centered medical research. This was back in 2015, and I find it just ridiculous that some people in our society would only care when a law is broken. Well, there's kind of a little bit of asterisk to that too, because even when people point out, like David was an example of a person who pointed out when and where the laws are being brushed aside that regulate these already horrific practices, and people in power like Javier Becerra, Kamala Harris, they just swept it under the rug, left it uninvestigated in the state of California. But yeah, whether or not a law that's currently on the books is broken in the process, it is a tragedy, and people's hearts need to be rended when they look into each and every individual story of the people impacted, or if they don't know the names, reading these studies, looking at the numbers, seeing these examples of fetal tissue specimens, and to let their heart break over it. Whether or not a law was broken, this was a murdered child. And yeah, I'm with you there that more and more people need to open their hearts and minds to what's going on in our country that's just so hidden away.
Yeah. And I think it's by design, because if people were to even just look back throughout history, there's a pattern here. Majority of these children that are being born alive and harvested for their organs, it's happening without the mother's consent or knowledge. That goes against bodily autonomy. So majority of the pro-choice people that I've talked to, instantly they're like, well, I'm not for fetal organ harvesting and I'm not for fetal tissue experiments. Just because I support abortion doesn't mean I support that. And then I ask them, well, have you ever heard about it before this? They're like, no. Well, if you have even sent a donation to Planned Parenthood or any private abortion facility, you are indirectly supporting fetal organ harvesting and fetal tissue experiments. And that's something that's really hard for them to grasp. It's hard for the other side of the fence to understand that this clinic, this medical facility, it's supposed to be good. It's supposed to help people. They can't imagine that an abortion facility would change a procedure specifically to follow the steps for fetal organ harvesting. You have to skip inducing fetal demise. You have to make sure that there is a fetal heartbeat so that there is no cellular decay. If you kill that child on the first day of a 2-day procedure, we're talking specifically second trimester, third trimester, or even they've used children even in the first trimester for experiments. As I was saying before, there's a pattern throughout history where whether we can bring up the first immortalized stem cell line, WI38, Winchester Institute 38. Davenport Hooker, I'm sorry, not even Davenport Hooker. It was Dr. Hayflick. Dr. Hayflick obtained a second trimester little baby girl from Sweden because it was illegal in America at the time for abortions to happen. So he had to go across the ocean to have this child's organs shipped to Pennsylvania, where he was doing experiments. He immortalized the first fetal stem cell line from this child without the mother's knowledge. The mother only found out that the baby was taken for experiments after the fact because they forgot to ask her, hey, do you have any diseases that we should know about? And when she was like, well, why? Like, oh, well, we took your fetal tissue for experimentation. And that's how she found out that her child was taken. But then we could even go back, never mind the 19 when this happened, to the 30s. Davenport Hooker did experiments for decades from the 90s onward, where he was, again, premeditatedly using C-section to obtain these intact children.
No.
You could look it up on
gosh.
YouTube. I think it's called Human Fetal Development.
I've seen the video footage. Those were, experiments
That's
on
crazy.
live extracted fetuses.
From 7.5 weeks to 20 weeks and change. He was doing these experiments. I think it was over 150 children that were used. These children, 7.5 weeks with a C-section. You see, that's not normal.
Oh my
And it's not a coincidence
gosh.
either. You see, you would
That's
do a
so
C-section
crazy.
after like 11, 13 weeks. You wouldn't do a C-section at 7.5 weeks. You wouldn't do a C-section at 8.5 weeks. You wouldn't do a C-section that early on. So why did
Mhm.
Davenport Hooker have the access to these children that were, again, taken whole and intact, still alive, dwindling away? And then he would poke and prod at them to see the senses. He would either poke at their spine, he would poke at their palms, they would grasp, or they would kick or swing their limbs, their arms, their legs. He would poke at the later on children, like, and I'm talking probably 13, 14 weeks. He would poke at their jaws and have them swallow. All of this being recorded. They were suspended in fluid, and I believe he was recording them with like a World War II style like pedal camera so he could still use his hands to torment these children.
Oh
The
my
earlier
gosh.
stages, they dwindled away after a couple of minutes, but the later stages, it was like 15 minutes it would take them to die. And again, he would just poke at them and
So,
record it.
my gosh, well, how is it that how did a woman end up in that situation where she was on an operating table having an elective C-section at like 7
Well, I
weeks
mean, in
pregnant?
the 1930s, like again, it wasn't legal like that. They called it therapeutic abortions. So again, these were like for so many different loophole type of reasons. Again, if it was a medical necessity at that time, again, this woman would show up to a trusted doctor that again is going to change procedure to cut that woman open to take the child out. The later babies, yeah, like it's an induction or inducing labor. But either way, these children are whole and intact. That's
Oh my gosh.
the main point here is
That's
these
just so
children are
crazy to
being
me.
taken from their mothers without consent, majority of the time without consent. And then they're being sold to a procurement agency or just used for experimentation. Again, you guys
Wow.
can pull up video clips even from the Davenport Hooker experiments. They have the gestational age of the child and like a description of what was observed during the experiment. But there's just so many different experiments throughout history where you can see a lack of consent. And that pattern is still happening today. And that's what happened even with Clementine. You know,
Hmm.
there's a lot that people need to understand, and our government does. Like they know where these children are coming from. They understand that taxpayer dollars are being used to fund these experiments, and it's just all just very unfortunate.
What I've read about Davenport Hooker specifically, other than seeing a couple video clips and through some of the work of Center for Medical Progress, kind of having that historical, eye to, kind of display, here's the history of this tragedy, of this unethical research in our country. I also read some publications in the JSTOR, JSTOR. It's a digital library online. They have a copy of something called Ex Utero, Live Human Fetal Research and the Films of Davenport Hooker by Emily K. Wilson. So this is documenting the history of that practice. So just another example of things that are so off the wall, so impossible to our minds that it couldn't possibly be true. And that's where a lot of doubt in our country comes from. People think because something sounds so over the top, it couldn't possibly be real history. It is, unfortunately. And that's why we need to equally be, all of us in our country, looking at current injustices in the area of abortion, you know, and fighting to make sure that that none of this is just allowed to take place. Documenting things is just such an important part of this.
Yeah. And that's why even like currently, like children like even the DC-5, could you imagine if their parents understood the severity of what happened to their children, if they understood that they could be a voice to try to get justice for their children? Because it's obvious that most, if not all of the DC-5 were alive and killed after birth. Santangelo didn't use any type of injection. He apparently snipped the umbilical cords. These children were alive. These children suffered. And till today, there still has not been justice for the DC-5. Each one of those children has a name thanks to POW. And that is something that is very, very beautiful. And POW is another amazing organization for everything that they've done for the DC-5. Even just caring for those children as if they were their children. Again, it's truly beautiful people over there. And
We agree.
again, Teresa and Lauren, again, both amazing ladies. And they gave humanity to these children. The same as WI-38 or HEK-293, to name a few. Like, these children should have names, but they have labels. It's sad to think that the DC-5 are in the care of the federal government, and apparently they're gonna say something soon. They're gonna give us some type of news, and hopefully it's good news. But the importance of remembering that these aren't just pieces of tissue. This isn't just genetic material. This isn't just somebody's property. This isn't just a problem for the federal government to figure out. These are people, I've been having a lot of debates lately about personhood and moral ground of what makes somebody a person. And it's something that's very confusing to me. What do these children offer to society? Everything. They have a place in society. They are somebody's family member. Speaking specifically for my family, Clementine is a person. Clementine matters just as much as me or you guys or anybody else. And the fact of the matter is, Clementine as a person should not have suffered the way that she did. Clementine should not be somebody's property right now. Clementine has a name, but instead somewhere, either in this country or somewhere in this world, she is labeled with some type of code or numbers. And that's not fair. The many different experiments that they could be doing on her, not one of them are morally okay. Not any of them are ethically okay. There are so many different alternatives. Instead of using fetal tissue, you can get stem cells from somebody's blood, a consenting adult. And miraculous things can happen. It's the 21st century. We can use adult stem cells, and they're just as valuable as fetal stem cells. I forget and you guys probably can help me out with this. I'll phone a friend. It's ICPs. Is that the
Induced
alternative?
pluripotent stem cells.
There
There
we
you
go.
go.
2 points to Robert.
iPSCs.
Yeah. If there's
But we
anyone who
have
would know it.
alternatives. We have so many different alternatives, and there's just no reason to use fetal tissue from non-consenting, tormented infants. Because truthfully, that's what all of these children are. They are infants. Clementine, and again, to bring up David Daleiden and his work again, in the documentary that Center for Medical Progress put together, Kathy Altman and Kathy Wheeler reviewed the medical documents. And with that being said, the procedure was under 3 minutes. There was no mention of forceps or SOFR clamps. How are you going to do a dismemberment without those tools? On top of this, they've reviewed all of the anesthesia logs, everything. They reviewed every step of the procedure, and they're confused. It doesn't make sense to them. It's not something that they would have done. And everything points towards Clementine was already being birthed when already entering the operating room.
Wow.
And Alina Hoover was the trainee that apparently did the dismemberment abortion. Dismemberment abortion takes anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes for an expert. Alina Hoover was not an expert. It's been 2 years now. And from what I have heard, Alina Hoover has actually worked her way up the ladder in Planned Parenthood. And it's like when I first saw Alina Hoover's picture, I wanted to feel bad for her. I wanted to think all right, well, maybe after she saw Clementine, maybe that scared her away. Maybe she quit. Maybe she stopped, but she didn't. And now she's built her way up in this system of, again, trafficking. And it's just really disgusting. It's just really sad.
I would love to show a clip from this new documentary. But before I do that, I have a question for you. And this is from us in our pro-life work, that we hear from people comments of, I believe you when you say that babies are being dismembered and their body parts are being sold and bought, that there's fetal organ harvesting, trafficking happening. I believe you. But I have a hard time believing you when you say that babies are born alive and harvested. What would you say to those doubters out there, those naysayers, that they're like, I agree with you so far as to this, but the born alive part, come on, man, that's a bit hard to believe.
What was that one woman's name? I'm sorry. What was her name? Karen Larton? Is that how you pronounce it?
Perrin with a P.
Perrin Larton, sorry. So Perrin Larton publicly said on record that she has seen fetal hearts beating. But I mean, it's kind of common sense. That would be the easiest way for me to answer them. It's common sense. No different than harvesting an adult's organs. You can't harvest the organs of a dead person. There has to be
That's what I
cellular
say.
life. There has to be blood flow. They either have to have just died. But again, if this is a true dismemberment abortion, if they're ripping the arms and legs and torsos of this child, you are now destroying the integrity of the organs that you're trying to harvest. If these organs are not intact, they're not valuable.
Yeah.
If these organs are dead, they're not valuable. So how do you get the organs from one of these children? You skip inducing fetal demise to ensure that the tissue and organs are viable. If it's a 2-day procedure or a 3-day procedure for second or third trimester, which again, the organs are more valuable. And from that point, again, through excessive physical dilation or excessive medicinal dilation with labor-inducing drugs like excessive misoprostol or Pitocin, you then birth this child whole and intact. There are certain loopholes, but they're supposed to be illegal, like partial birth abortion or DNX. They're supposed to be illegal. They still happen. Harriet, from the DC-5. Regardless,
Yeah.
that's one of the loopholes to have an intact baby. But again, it shouldn't happen. It's not supposed to happen. And
But it
then
does
there's
happen.
partial dismemberment. That's something that's technically not illegal, where again, thanks to David Daleiden and the Center for Medical Progress, on camera, you have had abortion workers admit that they will pop a finger off, and that's a partial dismemberment. Well, it's a dismemberment. They popped off a finger, and now they can remove the rest of the child whole and intact to ensure the integrity of the organs.
From my
And again,
memory, I think it was an arm that they said, but either way,
yeah,
like taking off
pop
one
off an arm,
one
you know,
member in order to then take the rest of them out intact. It's
and
ridiculous.
that's the whole thing is there's nobody else in the room. So even if they wanted to say, yeah, sure, it was a dismemberment, like with Clementine, who's going to say otherwise? Well, the medical documents really show exactly what happened. And there wasn't a dismemberment. It
The
wasn't a
three
partial birth
minutes.
abortion. It wasn't a partial dismemberment. It was a complete induction. It was an induced labor. And again, like, it's not normal. It's not okay. It's not legal. There are supposed to be laws that prevent this from happening.
Right. Like, for example, the only example of buying and selling should be the people who, collect their paycheck at the end of the day, the end of the week, the end of the month for doing this work. It's like, in that sense, the buying and selling is okay because that's just, earning your keep. That's like, no, this whole structure is unconscionable. But then still with the putting a dollar amount on the body parts, that has happened. People still do break the law too.
And they will say, well, it's not profit. It's paying for the packaging and the transportation. You know what I mean? There's National Abortion Federation guidelines that they're following here. You know what I mean? And again, it's really obvious to understand that the same way that the bad guys traffic organs are we seeing a parallel. People that are trafficking organs, they're not keeping a clean record. They're not keeping a legit paper trail of the income. These are organs that they're selling. These are $1 million experiments. The amount of money through grants that the government allows, it's really something that people have to wake up to. They're not doing this for the benefit of humanity. Majority of the time, it's bragging rights or an award or a dollar sign connected to it. They're not really finding beneficial results that are helping anybody again. And even if they were to find a cure, it stems from the torment
Yeah.
of another human being. It stems from the murder of the life of another person. And that's something that, again, we could find a cure from cancer from Clementine's body. And again, that's not something that I would want to even continue. I would want it destroyed. And that's me saying that with my chest. Anything that has been done with Clementine's body, any award, send it back. Any amount of money that they've made, return it. Any progress that came from even a stem cell inside of Clementine, destroy it.
Yeah.
Clementine is a person. Her legacy isn't that of a specimen. Her value is not that of whatever they could be using her for. Clementine has saved children's lives. Clementine has helped families. Clementine has opened people's eyes to the naysayers that think, oh, well, they're not birthing children alive. Well, children like Clementine, children like any one of the DC-5, yeah, they're different. Or again, look into Kermit Gosnell. That's not even fetal organ harvesting. That's just, again, the abortion industry's finest. That was literally birthing children alive and snipping the backs of their necks. So again, we could go throughout history. There are so many different cases of abortionists where you have found in shipping containers intact children, in their property, in their garages, the remains of children whole and intact. So again, history continues to repeat itself within the abortion industry. Quite literally, without fetal organ harvesting, there would be less children being born alive. But hey, that's hopefully a topic that more people will talk about. This is a genocide when it comes to the abortion industry, but this is that of slavery when it comes to fetal organ harvesting.
Right.
Yeah,
One
you
thing
you
that
can't practice vice with virtue, and where there's smoke, there's fire. So why would we be
that
surprised that babies are being born alive and harvested for their organs? An analogy that comes to my mind on the topic of well, it's not really buying and selling babies. It's the buying and selling of the packaging and the transportation, or et cetera, et cetera. And it makes me think of how Planned Parenthood will say abortion is just a percentage of a fraction of what we actually do. And see, and they'll have it of like, they've given out X amount of condoms and birth control and STI testing, and so it's guys is like, see, abortion is just a fraction of this, but it's like, but you are an abortion business. Like, that is the moneymaker. Like, anyways, that's just where my mind went. Robert, were you about to say something?
Yeah, just how I have, it's both a blessing and a curse. I've even, you know, Melanie knows me real well and knows my faults here. I am hyper fixated on details. I go into hyper, hyper focus mode when it comes to like all these details. And the crazy thing in this, when it comes to studying this field of, medical research, there's so many moving parts. It's hard to keep everything in view at once. But one thing that's absolutely clear is that for like, one of the paramount reasons why none of this should be allowable, none of this is conscionable, is that the scientists, the principal investigators, they from the outset are seeking to use electively aborted organs as the specimens of their medical research. They pre-plan it. They are essentially, when it comes to the way that they've planned out their experiments ahead of time, they're deciding when and where they want to get their resources. And a whole library of research built on needing victims is a field of research that needs to be shut down. If you don't want to use any alternatives, even if you can't use any existing alternatives, that research ethically has to be shelved until an ethical, alternative does become available. It's just so straightforward to me, just knowing that for that research to continue as written, as planned, it needs a victim. Don't do it. It's just, yeah, I hope that the more that people look into this, they realize that that's what it all comes down to. You can't plan to do research if you're making it require a population of victims.
I mean, remember the Nuremberg trials. Remember what the Nazis were doing to pregnant women. Remember what they were doing to children, But again, I mean, America, they saw some value and they kind of turned a blind eye a little bit to the root of where these experiments stemmed from. And that's the sad reality to even today. We can come up with excuses like, oh, well, guys, when I tell you, I've heard things from people that, again, I truly, I'm like, wow. I've had people say, well, at least they're doing something with her body. Or I've had people say, well, isn't it interesting? I don't think it's interesting. And no, I would much rather visit my child and a grave site, something where I can pay respect to her without having to wonder which one of the many different types of experiments are they doing. Again, fetal brain organoids, xenotransplantation, Pittsburgh University, to name one of the few places that are stitching the skin of children onto the backs of rodents. There's other places where, again, xenotransplantation is taking the organs of children. They've taken the kidneys of children and transplanted them inside mice where urine is still produced, the mouse is still functioning and kept alive using a human child's organs. And again, like, this is something that could be happening to Clementine. And that's something that no parent should have to even try to understand. We can stop this from happening to Clementine, and we can stop this from happening to other children. We just need more of the public to wake up and understand that this is happening and it does matter. It is important to use the other alternatives instead of using innocent children. We just need people to do more, and they can. We have a lawyer who has just sent in complaints to the HHS, to departments within the HHS, and to the DOJ. They've been within the office, these complaints, for the past couple of months, and we have not gotten any response. If people can help with reaching out to the HHS and the DOJ and help demand an investigation for Clementine, that is something that can help put it back on their radar. President Trump did cut the federal funding for a second time now when it comes to excuse me, guys, when it comes to taxpayer dollars and fetal organ harvesting. And that's something that's good, but it's not enough. We need to ban fetal organ harvesting.
Right.
We need to ban fetal tissue experiments. And if the HHS and the DOJ understands what happened to Clementine, they understand the human rights violations on Clementine and her mother, then hopefully we can get justice for both Clementine, her mother, and all of the other children that are currently being experimented on. Now, in America, that's just one place where this is happening, but it's happening to children all around the world. I recently just posted about an experiment that's going on in Japan where they took 15 children, 8 little baby girls and 7 little boys, and they've taken their legs and stripped the muscle and tissue to study the ligaments and development within utero. And again, I feel like not too necessary. There's so many different experiments that, again, are more of like avoidable. You know, there was one, and I believe it was Iran. I believe, don't quote me on that. It was either Iran or Afghanistan. It's another post that I shared. And they submerged these children, second trimester babies, in honey for months to see natural embalming methods. But in history, we already know that they've used honey as embalming agents. Again, not too useful, not too practice, but it happened. It's recorded. So why do we have to use the bodies of children for these experiments, especially more of the curiosity studies? It's not right.
To the point of the need for investigation, if there's anyone who's skeptical about any necessity to investigate whether or to what extent crimes took place, I wanted to quote something from a government research body, the Congressional Research Service. They have this document called Abortion at or Over 20 Weeks Gestation, Frequently Asked Questions. And this is a quote I always return to. In medical abortions, and this talking about medical or medication abortions, mifepristone, after 20 weeks. In medical abortions, neither mifepristone nor misoprostol kills the fetus. The trauma of labor usually results in the death of the fetus up through 21 weeks of pregnancy. However, some fetuses at 22 weeks gestation or after may survive labor associated with medical abortion. An examination of the outcomes of extremely preterm infants from intended pregnancies born between weeks 22 and 25 may shed light on the viability of fetuses that survive a second trimester medical abortion. And other studies, and when it comes to studies, other documents that we've seen, it's said that there's a 50% chance of children late in pregnancy to be born alive at these stages. So we know that there's a 50% chance that Clementine was born alive. And Tommy, you've told us that the documentation shows that it was only noted 3 minutes for that labor to take place. I would dare any governmental investigative body to say, no, that doesn't raise any curiosity. That doesn't perk up our ears. There's no, why this needs the full attention of the government.
On a state level, the Cherry Hill Women's Center needs to be shut down. Richard, Amla Black, Alina Hoover, and everybody else that was in the room while they were destroying our family should be prosecuted to the fullest extent. Federally, I hope and I pray that men like Robert Kennedy and even President Donald Trump will understand that Clementine mattered and we care about her and what they're doing to her is wrong and that we can find her. There's an entire paper trail that, again, with even the help of David Daleiden, you can see on the documentary. It explains everything as clear as day. We can find her. Every single crime that was committed, all of the evidence that we have, any senator or any representative, any person investigating within the HHS or the DOJ, I wish they would take the time to care about Clementine, but we're still hoping and praying. So we have gotten really far. Again, I still have a lot of great ideas, beautiful ideas for Clementine, remembering Clementine with Clementine's garden, a resting place for her and a memorial for all children that have been lost from abortion or any child at all that is now in heaven. And I want it to be a beautiful place for her. but I also want to change laws for Clementine. If we can enforce Clementine's law to ban fetal organ harvesting, ban fetal tissue experiments, then Clementine can continue to protect children and protect life. And that is something that is very beautiful. And that's what I want for Clementine. I want her to be beautiful. I want her to be seen as nothing more than who she is, a beautiful little girl who's going to make a really big difference in this world.
Tommy, if somebody wants to support you and your fight for your daughter Clementine, tell us, how can people get involved? I know you have a GiveSendGo.
Yes, the GiveSendGo again is to help us with the legal battle that we have ahead, but then also the beautiful things for Clementine, like Clementine's Garden, and also helping other families in need. We have an organization for Clementine, Clementine's Voice, and our goal is to fight for the vulnerable, the forgotten, and really just anybody who's in need. So again, if you guys would like to help with helping families with trying to fight for Clementine, because we are still looking for her, then it really would be greatly appreciated.
And we will have the GiveSendGo link below of these podcast episodes. I want to emphasize Tommy's call to action to call HHS and the DOJ and demand an investigation into Clementine, and also want to give a shout out to David Daleiden and the Center for Medical Progress. Pro-Life San Francisco has been able to stand in support of CMP through our court support efforts for almost a decade, and we're so thankful for the recent victory that David Daleiden had in his case, and thankful for David's heart for also fighting for justice for Clementine. And if you yourself want to take an action step to fight against the fetal organ harvesting happening in our backyard here at the University of California, San Francisco, please go to ethicalresearchnow.org. Take the action step. Let all the people in power within the university system that you too demand for an end to fetal organ harvesting and demand for ethical research now. So that is all that I have. Any last parting words, Robert and or Tommy?
No?
I would also like to give a shout out to everybody over at PAL, Lauren and Teresa. You guys are great. And again, we are still fighting for the DC-5. We are still fighting for Clementine. It is important to reach out to your representatives in your state. It's important to reach out to different senators who speak out for these children. Again, there are senators, great senators that do speak out for abortion victims and for fetal organ harvesting and fetal tissue experiment to be completely stopped in this country. So shout out to all those guys too. I'm sure we could put a list of different great senators that you can call, and, again, just remember Clementine, remember the DC-5, and just continue to do your own research on different parts of history that continues to repeat itself.
Yeah, so let's continue to fight for justice for the 5 and justice for Clementine. And I know it was recently Clementine's birthday in heaven. So very special, blessed, happy birthday to our beloved Clementine. Thank you so much, Tommy, for coming on the Harvesting Justice podcast. And thanks everyone for listening. Bye.